Essence of Biz. And I did say that in this first hour, we are going to be in conversation with Cumani Nobongoza, founder and business consultant at Requisite. Namhlanje, our topic of focus is human resource management in a business. Masibulise Cumani, welcome to the show and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Thandi. Thanks for having me today, and good afternoon to you and the listeners.
All right. In doing human resource management in the context of business, so that we give a bit of context to the conversation as we proceed with it.
So in simple terms, it is all about getting the most out of the people component of your business in the most cost-effective manner possible.
Okay.
In the simplest of terms.
In the simplest of terms.
Yes.
So, because all businesses will have a human element to it.
Yes.
Well, until AI does really take over. But for now, robots are still coming on the way, to completely eliminate abantu. But for now, we will always have the human element.
Abantu, yes.
So, so what you're saying is human resource management relates to how do you make sure that ababantu you are able to work with them to get maximum benefit or output?
Yes, maximum benefit, output, creativity. There's a lot that you can get out of people as long as they are nurtured in the right way and they are given the necessary support.
So what would you say are some of the reasons why you need to have an effective human resource management strategy? Because it's something that they just ignore it or they feel like it's not as important. So having an effective human resource management strategy,
so an effective human resource management strategy will help management to speak the language of the knowledge worker.
Okay.
That is what you would refer to the worker in the modern day because of the easy access to information that they have.
Okay.
So firstly, it's speaking the language of the knowledge worker. And then an effective human resource management strategy will also help a business to get the most out of a SWOT analysis tool when it comes to managing the growth of the business. So remember, recently we spoke about a SWOT analysis, and I said it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that one would need to look at as a business owner to evaluate what's happening internally within the business and what needs to be improved, and then to also evaluate the external environment in terms of being prepared and ready to go through the growth phase of the business. So once you are able then to align your human resource activity with a SWOT analysis, you are then in a better position to actually start making profits and growing profits as well. And then an effective human resource management strategy can also go a long way in encouraging entrepreneurship.
Okay.
So a lot of people are familiar with entrepreneurship, right? So entrepreneurship, which is INTRA, is when entrepreneurial activity happens within an existing business.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. When Nkosana Makate, who invented Please Call Me, came up with that particular invention, he was in the setup of an existing company.
Sure.
A big cellular network provider, which obviously had all of the resources for him to then exploit the entrepreneurial activity. So that's what you ideally want from your workers. You want the creativity, which then leads to entrepreneurship, which then works for you as a business owner as well.
Wow. And I think, Nyani, you do want to engage your employees enough to support them, to ensure that they are capacitated, they are developed, they are inspired to ensure into okokubana they are able to come up with creative ideas that could help the business in itself. And
Of
also
course.
in terms of coming up with creative ideas that could expand lo msebenzi wenziwayo within the business
Yes.
as well. And I think that's quite an interesting one. Now, abantu who are dealing with human resources, ne?
Yes.
People who are, let's say, who head that function or who are employed as leading the department, if you're talking about a bigger company or organization.
Yes.
Do you think that they are always fully equipped and capacitated enough to understand how to work with people? Because I would imagine that that function sits at that table,
Yeah.
at that door. Yeah, but
Yes.
so do you think that they are able to deal with the employees, and if not, what would be the advice to ensure that is there's improvement in terms of how the interface between the organization and the employees is managed through the human resource department?
Look, there are instances where companies will get it right. And as a result, they then achieve high productivity, which then leads to high revenues. But in the instances where the heads of these human resources department don't get it right, I have found that it's mostly because of the outdated carrot and stick method of motivating your staff. This therefore has a negative impact on the cost effectiveness of the human resource function, because obviously high staff turnover starts to creep in to the business, which then is largely due to them not speaking, like I said, the language of the knowledge worker.
Okay.
So
Do they need to then be young people?
not
Or-
necessarily.
Okay, clue themselves up with the
Not ne-
current or
Remember with technology, technology doesn't necessarily favor young people. It's all about who has access to the technology and what tools you have to enable you to use that type of technology effectively. Hence, one of the priorities for any developing country is to make sure that people have access to internet and Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi at that. Because a lot of the times I've heard discussions where people complain that in South Africa we still have high rates in terms of internet and data compared to other African countries. So that in itself is a barrier in terms of accessing information, which is obviously needed in order for you to make the right decisions, whether you are young or old. So going back to the carrot and stick method, this is a terminology in management which refers to an outdated way of motivating your staff, where you are dangling a carrot on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you are beating your staff up with a stick to get them to reach targets and to toe the line, if I may call it that. Then obviously that is where your labor unions will come in, and then you will see all of these headlines in the news about strikes, and it all stems in most cases to this carrot and stick way of motivating your staff, which if you're looking at the knowledge worker, this is outdated, so there's a mismatch.
so what's supposed to happen?
So ideally, you want to be in a situation where you are identifying the talents of your staff members,
Okay.
so that you can then match the job to that particular talent or that particular skill,
Okay.
because that then eliminates or minimizes frustration between management and your
Staff
employees.
employees.
Because remember, in middle management especially, is a very tough position to be in. It doesn't matter what type of company you are working with, unless maybe it's in the growth sector, like a tech company. Because in middle management, you are almost between a rock and a hard place, where you've got your executive at the top and the board that you need to report to, and then
The
below you, you've got the thousands of employees that seemingly are never satisfied with anything. Hence, once South Africa especially, we have what we call strike season. Once there's a strike in one industry, it's like a ripple
Overflows.
effect, and it's like a fire, just a wildfire just catching on. And these are the questions and these are the challenges we need to ask ourselves as entrepreneurs, in terms of what actually leads to that breakdown between staff and management, which then spills out onto the streets in terms of strike action or protest action, whether it's protected or not.
I think Lelu ithethayo of a match, the creation of a match between the talent and the skill that's available to the jobs. Because I think sometimes yenzeka le nto yoba, there's bekho mismatch, and obviously that mismatch is gonna, definitely lead to unhappiness
Yes.
on both ends. Yeah, but because if
Most
I'm happy in
definitely.
a job, I'm doing it maybe for whatever reason. I'm hungry, I need work, whatever.
Exactly.
And on the one hand, I will not be able to be productive, so there'll be also unhappiness in the part of my employer, because
Yes.
andenzi ngolu hlobo ekufanele uba
You're
ndenza
not
ngalo.
reaching targets.
Yes, I'm not effective. I'm just not productive.
Exactly.
And now there's another aspect that I wanted to touch on, especially relating to smaller businesses. Lando bana, you want the right employee. There's something. Okay, Clammy, you can also talk about, but do you think there's something as the right employee? But I will say the right employee, as in someone who will be able to deliver what you want to a T,
Okay.
and someone that will be driven, someone that will be independent, someone that will will be chasing and wanting to achieve and all
Yes.
that. The right employee for that specific job.
Exactly.
And how do you find a balance? You are a smaller business and you need the right employee. Everyone is looking for the right employee.
Yes.
But you don't have imali enough to pay this person.
So firstly, what the business owner would ideally need to look at or appreciate is what it is that makes up the person as a whole, like the individual, right? So this is where now you would need to look at the person's body, right? Does the job match the physical capabilities of that particular individual, right? So that would be one aspect. Then you would also need to look at the mind, right, of that particular individual. Is this job going to be mentally stimulating to this person? Because remember, I've just said that we are now in an age of the knowledge worker who has information at the tip of their fingers, right, via their phones. So is this job going to be monotonous, repetitive, or is it going to be stimulating to this particular individual? That is where now the match, you're trying to find a match between the individual and that particular job, or those specific KPIs within that contract. Then we have the heart, right? So does the employee love what they are doing? Do they have a passion for what they are doing? Because this also determines how they will perform at work. Are they going to be troublesome? Because obviously now with labor law, you can't just get rid of someone willy-nilly. Otherwise, you might have a problem as well. And then you would also need to look at the person's spirit, right? Does the job speak to the employee's sense of conscience, which is doing the right thing, right? So obviously this would not apply if you are engaging in illegal activities such as selling drugs, right? But obviously if you are a company that has the well-being of the immediate community at heart, you engage in your CSI programs. We now have ESG. So the way in which your business is making money, what type of impact is that having on the environment? And does that speak to the culture within the workplace, which is largely driven by your employees? Because they are the ones who need to push the buttons so that even if you are not there as the boss, as the manager, the work still continues. And the work, the quality of the work, it will be driven largely by the culture within that particular organization, right? Then business owners need to also look at and accept that money is not always a good motivator
Okay.
especially for the knowledge worker.
Okay.
Because the knowledge worker, especially nowadays, we refer to this particular demographic as AMA 2000. They want jobs that are fulfilling and meaningful. Then we can talk about the money. But in the immediate term, they are in a position where they are still finding themselves as young people. They're still finding their voices. Hence, it's always a good idea with staff complement SACO and the makeup of your staff to have a nice balance of your more mature, experienced staff members, and then the younger guys who will then bring in the energy and those particular ideas that you need to encourage entrepreneurship. So it becomes complicated in some instances, but when you look at the specific components like the ones that I've just mentioned, they are fairly simple if you just stick to them and then try and find an effective way to apply them.
Yeah, and when it comes to any into that that becomes a huge problem is that your human resources, I think, should be based on e-policies.
Yes.
But because we don't like papers and we don't like anything that's got to do with documents, sometimes we can decide to overlook into it develop our policies. And I don't know if you could speak to Mhlawumbi, what would be the simplest process to have, even if it's a basic human resource kind of a policy. Like obviously they could vary in terms of how big they are,
Yes.
how extensive they are, but just ibe khona nje that we can refer to in case clashes happen and you've got nothing
course,
to reference.
So in most instances, the type of policy that you would have in the workplace would be largely determined by the number of staff members that you have within the organization. So obviously your business will be classified as a micro enterprise depending on the number of staff that you have. Then we've got SMMEs, we've got your large corporations. And turnover is also tied to that.
Sure.
So when it comes to the specific policies, an HR practitioner would be a good starting point in terms of consulting them to say, listen, this is the turnover, this is the number of staff members that I have within the business. What would be the way forward in terms of having specific policies to make sure that I'm operating within the law, the labor law of that particular country or that particular province or region, right? Because in the previous week, I did say that the entrepreneurship does give you the license to do anything that you put your mind to, provided that you are not infringing on anyone's rights and you are within the law, especially labor law. Because in litigation, especially with cases that end up at the CCMA, can be quite costly to your business. And remember, whatever policy that you have, you will also find that it also protects you as the business owner. So it doesn't necessarily speak to the rights of the employee, but it also speaks to your needs as a small business, because obviously there are people who will take advantage of certain situations, and certain policies are there to protect both parties so that matters don't necessarily go to labor unions and, like I said, the CCMA. So an HR practitioner, in terms of looking at the size of the business, where the business is operating, what type of industry is the business operating in, because there are certain policies that are particular and specific to certain industries. That would be a good starting point.
Interesting. Well, I think that's all we have time for for today. We could continue, but ixesha lethu lemkile.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could give us nje your contact details so that if someone wants to maybe continue this conversation with you, they can be able to do so.
Okay, so that would be 068 543 8272. And then on email, it's Cumani, that is CUMANI, at requisite sba.co.za. So just one last thing, Thandi, a bit of good news. So the latest unemployment numbers came in from the Statistician General. So the unemployment rate has decreased slightly by 0.2%, which speaks then to the tenacity that we have as a country, which means that even though we have all of these challenges, we are still
There's
forging
still a bit
ahead.
of hope.
Yeah. So to all the entrepreneurs out there, let's keep
Keep
on.
at it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, Kimpulaplu of Uganda Community Radio, we're going to go to an ad break. And once we come back, we're going to be looking at some of the points that we made with Cumani Nobongoza relating to human resources.